She came to Mass every Sunday. She sat in the third pew on the left, near the statue of the Sorrowful Mother. I noticed her because she was always early, and because she wept quietly during the consecration, the way people weep who still believe what they are watching. And every Sunday, when the time came, she rose with everyone else and walked forward and received the body of Christ on her tongue. By every outward sign, she was a holy woman, and she was falling apart. She told me, when she finally sat across from me, that she could not pray anymore, that the house felt cold in a way no furnace touched, that her sleep had turned to a thin, gray thing full of dread, and that her teenage son had begun to scream things at night he could not remember in the morning. She had been to her doctor. She had been to a counselor. She said, been to 3 other priests, and each had told her kindly to pray more and trust God. She was praying, she was trusting, and the ground beneath her feet kept giving way. What none of us asked her for a long time was a simpler question. Not how often she went to Mass, how often she went to confession. The answer was the hinge of everything. My name is Chad Ripperger. I am a Catholic priest, and for many years now, the work entrusted to me has included the ministry of exorcism. I do not say that to frighten you, and I do not say it to make myself interesting. I say it because of what that work has taught me about ordinary souls in ordinary parishes, souls who would never imagine their trouble has anything to do with what I do. The woman I just described is not one person. She is a composite, drawn from patterns I have seen too many times to count. Her details change so that no one is exposed and no confidence is broken. But the pattern is real. The pattern is the whole reason I am speaking. I want to be careful with you. I am not going to tell you that the demonic is hiding behind every difficulty in your life or that every dry season in prayer is an attack. Most suffering is simply the weight of living in a fallen world. But I have learned that there is a door, a common one, an ordinary one, that we open ourselves week after week without ever knowing we have opened it. And I have learned that most of the people walking through it are not wicked, they are devout. That is the part that should make us stop. So let me tell you what we finally uncovered, and let me tell you the one sin that most Catholics commit, not once, not rarely, but on a schedule, weekly. With clean hands and a clear face and no idea at all. When she sat down with me, the first thing I did was nothing. I let her talk. People in distress have usually been interrupted by everyone in their lives, and a soul under pressure needs first of all to be heard. So I listened, and as she spoke, I began to notice the shape of the thing. She described her week, the Mass on Sunday, the rosary sometimes when she could focus, the way she had tried novena after novena and felt them dissolve like sugar in water. And then, almost in passing, she mentioned something she had not meant to make important. She had not been to confession in over 4 years. She said it the way people say a small thing, a bridge sentence on the way to something else. And I stopped her there, gently, and asked her to stay on it. 4 years. And in 4 years, she told me she had received Holy Communion almost every single Sunday, 50-some Sundays. For 400 years, the Church provided the laity with specific prayers to address situations in their homes that they could not explain. Most parishes stopped teaching them after 1965. Now, they have all been compiled into a concise, practical guide. Keep it near the door and read the first page tonight. You will find the link to get the book in the description and in the first pinned comment. A year, more than 200 times. 200 times she had walked up that aisle, past the Sorrowful Mother, and received the Lord of Heaven and Earth under her tongue. I asked her carefully why she had stayed away from the confessional so long. And here is what she said, and I want you to listen because it is the most common answer I hear, and it is sincere, and it is wrong. She said, I don't really do anything that bad. I'm not a murderer. I'm a good person. I figured communion took care of it. I figured communion took care of it. I have heard that sentence, or something close to it, more times than I can number. And it contains, folded up inside it, a misunderstanding so widespread that I have come to believe it is the single most damaging idea in the Church today. The idea that the Eucharist is a kind of general cleansing, that you go up, you receive, and whatever was wrong is rinsed away. That confession is for the very bad, the dramatic, the criminal, and the rest of us can simply keep receiving. Now I asked her more, not to pry and not to condemn. A physician does not shame the wound, he examines it. And as we spoke, the matter came out. There was a relationship in her life, a serious one, gravely contrary to the moral law that she had known for years was wrong and had chosen deliberately to continue. She knew it was grave. She knew the church taught against it. And she had decided with full deliberation to keep on and to keep receiving communion alongside it. Because as she said, she was a good person and surely God understood. I want to be exact here because this is the heart of it. There are 3 conditions for a sin to be mortal. The church has taught them with great care precisely so that we do not fall into either of the 2 ditches, the ditch of presumption and the ditch of despair. First, the matter must be grave. It must be something serious, a real violation of the law of God in an important matter. Second, there must be full knowledge that the act is gravely wrong. And third, there must be full and free consent of the will. Grave matter, full knowledge, full consent, all 3. This is not a trap. It is a mercy. It means that the half-awake sin, the sin you stumbled into without realizing, the thing you did in a moment of overwhelming weakness with your reason clouded, may well not carry the full weight of mortal sin. The church is not trying to catch you. She is trying to tell you the truth about the state of your soul, the way a good doctor tells you the truth about your body, because only the truth can be healed. But when all 3 are present, something terrible and quiet has happened. Sanctifying grace, the very life of God in the soul, the supernatural life poured into you at baptism, has been driven out. And here is what I needed this woman to understand, what I need you to understand, that grace is not decoration, it is not a feeling, it is the soul's true protection. It is the divine life living in you, and while it lives in you, you are, in the deepest sense, defended. Hell has no claim on a soul in the state of grace. None. Take that life away, and the house is no longer guarded. Now hold that beside what she had been doing. 200 times in that condition, she had gone forward and received the Eucharist. And St. Paul tells us plainly what that is. Whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord unworthily will be guilty of profaning the body and blood of the Lord. Let a man examine himself, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself. That is the first letter to the Corinthians, the 11th chapter, verses 27 through 29. Eats and drinks judgment upon himself. Not nothing, judgment. So picture what was actually happening week after week. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote more than a dozen questions on how fallen angels operate. Most Catholics have never read one line of it. This archive gathers that teaching, the 1,614 rite, and 4 centuries of documented cases into a single reference. Read it slowly, 1 chapter a night. You will find the link to get the book in the description and in the first posted comment in that 3rd pew. A soul already stripped of its protection by an ongoing grave sin, then approaching the all-holy God present in the sacrament, not to be healed because she would not name the wound, but to receive him into a soul that had shut the door on him. And St. Thomas Aquinas teaches us that the Eucharist does not forgive mortal sin. It is the food of those already alive in grace, the bread of the living. To receive it without that life is not to gain protection. It is to add a second grave sin, the sin of sacrilege, on top of the first. Stone upon stone. This is what I mean when I say a soul is handed over, not by some dramatic curse, by a habit. A weekly, sincere, well-dressed habit of receiving the Lord unworthily, which deepens the original sin, hardens the conscience a little more each time, and leaves the soul standing open and undefended, week after week, in front of an enemy that does not need to break down a single door, because the door has been left unlocked from the inside. And the most painful part, the part I sat with for a long time after she left, is that she did not know. She thought she was doing the most pious thing a Catholic can do. She thought the going up was the holiness. No one had told her otherwise. No one had taught her what the Council of Trent taught with such clarity, that anyone conscious of grave sin, no matter how contrite he believes himself to be, must first go to sacramental confession before approaching the Eucharist. No one had told her there was a key and that she had been turning it the wrong way for 4 years. So I told her, I want to be careful about how I describe what came next, because the change in a soul is not a special effect. It does not crackle. It is quieter than that and far more powerful. I did not lecture her. I did not raise my voice. I simply named the thing, plainly, the way you would tell someone you love that they have been walking on a broken leg. I told her that the trouble in her house and the cold in her prayers and the screaming in the night might have many causes, and that I would not pretend to know all of them. But I told her there was one thing entirely within her power to set right, one door she herself had been holding open, and that it could be shut today. I told her about the relationship, that it could not continue, that grace and a deliberate grave sin cannot share the same soul, and that no amount of communions would change that arithmetic. And I told her about the confessional, that the moment she walked in there, contrite, and named what she had named to me, the life of God would come flooding back into her soul, instantly, completely, the way light fills a room when you finally pull the curtain. She wept. Of course she wept. But not the gray weeping I had seen at Mass. This was something breaking open. She made her first confession in over 4 years that same week. She told me afterward that she had forgotten how it felt to be light, that she walked out of the church and the sky looked like a thing she had never seen. And the relationship, the grave matter underneath all of it, she ended. That was the hard part, the costly part, the part no priest can do for you. She did it. I will not give you a tidy ending, because that would be a lie, and I have promised you the truth. The house did not transform into paradise overnight. Healing a soul and a home is more like the slow return of warmth to frostbitten hands than the flip of a switch. But the cold lifted, the nights grew quiet, her sun settled, and she could pray again, which to her was worth more than all the rest, because she had her Lord back, and this time she received him the way he is meant to be received, into a soul that is his. Now let me say clearly what I am not telling you. I am not telling you that every Catholic who walks up to communion is in mortal sin. That would be a cruel and false thing to say, and it would be its own kind of poison, the poison of scruples that torments good souls into thinking every fault is damnable. Most people in your parish, on most Sundays, receive worthily and well, with venial faults at worst, which the Eucharist itself does forgive. I am not asking you to look around your church with suspicion, and I am certainly not asking you to turn that suspicion sharpened into terror against your own soul. What I am telling you is something narrower and more serious. If you are aware of a grave sin, a real one, grave matter, fully known, fully consented to, and you have not confessed it, do not receive communion until you have. That is not my rule. That is the church's, and underneath it, it is Christ's. So what do you do with this? Not in theory. This week, examine your conscience, honestly and without panic. Sit down in a quiet place, perhaps before the tabernacle if you can, and ask the Holy Spirit to show you the truth of your soul. Not to scare you, to free you. Go through the commandments slowly. Where have I gravely wronged God, my neighbor, myself, and not yet confessed it? If something rises up that is grave, known, and chosen, mark it. Do not argue with it. And do not magnify the small things into monsters either. That is the opposite error and just as harmful. Then go to confession. This is the key. This is the whole of what I have been trying to give you. The remedy is not exotic. It is not a secret prayer or a special blessing. It is the most ordinary thing in the Catholic Church, the confessional that sits, often empty now, along the side wall of nearly every parish on earth. Walk in. You do not need beautiful words. Tell the priest how long it has been. Name your sins, the grave ones, by kind and number as best you can recall, the rest as you are able. Make an act of contrition, receive absolution. And in that moment, by the words Christ gave his priests when he said, "Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them, the life of God returns to you whole." Then, and only then, receive the Eucharist. And when you do, understand what you are doing. You are receiving the living God into a soul that is alive to receive him. That is what worthy reception is. Not perfection, the state of grace. Build the ordinary defenses back into your week. Keep holy water in your home and use it, blessing yourself and your rooms and your children. Pray the rosary, even badly, even distracted, because Our Lady does not despise small offerings. Make a brief examination of conscience every night before you sleep. These are not magic. They are the worn, reliable tools the Church has handed down for centuries, and the enemy hates them precisely because they are so ordinary that we have stopped using them. Mercy is the point. I want that to be the loudest thing you hear. God is not waiting in the confessional to crush you. He is waiting there the way the Father waited for the prodigal, watching the road. Now, I want to tell you why this is happening now, in our time, on this scale. Something was lost, not all at once, and not by a single villain, but lost all the same. In the years after the Second Vatican Council, which closed in 1965, a great forgetting set in across much of the Church. The teaching did not change. The Church never reversed a word of what she has always held about mortal sin, about the real presence, about the necessity of confession. But the teaching stopped being taught. From pulpits and in classrooms, a generation and then another grew up hearing a great deal about God's love, which is true, and almost nothing about God's justice, which is also true, and nothing at all about the conditions under which a soul cuts itself off from that love. Look at what we can measure. Survey after survey in recent years has found that a large majority of Catholics, in some studies, nearly 7 in 10, do not believe what the Church teaches about the Eucharist, do not believe that it is truly the body and blood of Christ, but think it only a symbol. Sit with that. If the host is only a symbol, then receiving it carelessly costs nothing, and confession beforehand is a pointless formality. The collapse in belief about the Eucharist and the collapse of the confession lines are not two problems. They are one problem. Walk into most parishes on a Saturday afternoon and you will find the confessional empty, or nearly so, a half hour offered and a handful of souls, if any, while the communion line on Sunday stretches the length of the church and everyone, without exception, goes up. Everyone receives. Almost no one confesses. That arithmetic is not possible among a people who understand what they are doing. It is only possible among a people who were never told. And I will say this, with the quiet anger I cannot fully suppress, and I will own it as mine. The fault here is not first with the woman in the third pew. She did exactly what she was taught, or rather what she was never untaught, never warned away from. The fault lies with decades of soft preaching that could not bring itself to say a hard and saving word, that traded the whole counsel of God for a comfort that comforts no one in the end. She was failed. So many have been failed. And the enemy, who is patient and intelligent, has simply walked through the gap that the failure left open. But understand the second thing I am refusing to say. I am not telling you the church has fallen, or that her sacraments have lost their power, or that you should despair of the age we live in. The confessional still works. Every word of absolution still carries the full authority of Christ. The Mass is still the Mass, and the Eucharist is still the Lord. Nothing essential has been lost. What has been lost is the knowing, and knowing can be restored in you today by a single honest walk into a small dark room. So here's what I am asking of you, plainly as one soul to another. First, examine your conscience this week, not someday, this week, before you receive communion again. Be honest and be calm. Look for grave matter you have not confessed and refuse to inflate the small into the large. Second, if you find a grave sin, do not receive the Eucharist until you have been to confession. If you genuinely cannot tell whether something is grave, do not torment yourself guessing. Ask a priest. That is what we are for. Lay it before him and let him help you see clearly. Third, go to confession this week. Find the times posted at your parish, or call and ask, or simply go and knock. Make it a habit, not an emergency. The saints went often. Go monthly if you can. A soul confessed regularly is a soul that is hard to surprise. Fourth, when you are in the state of grace, receive the Eucharist and receive it with reverence and gratitude, knowing now what it is and who it is. Fifth, rebuild the ordinary armor, a nightly examination of conscience. The rosary, daily if you can manage it. Holy water in the home. Small things done faithfully that close the doors the enemy hopes to find open. Sixth, consecrate your family to the Sacred Heart and to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and live under that protection deliberately as a household, not as a private secret. And seventh, if you are carrying a real entangled burden, find a sound spiritual director, a faithful priest who knows the tradition, and let yourself be guided. You were never meant to walk this alone, and the proud insistence on doing so is itself one of the enemy's favorite tools. None of this is heavy in the end. It is the most natural thing in the world for a child to go to his father and say, I was wrong, and to be forgiven. That is all confession is. The church has simply guarded the door and kept the lamp lit. Let me leave you with the only thing that finally matters. The mercy of God does not run dry. It cannot. There is no sin so old, so repeated, so dressed in respectability that one honest confession does not wash it away completely, as though it had never been. The woman in the third pew carried 4 years and 200 unworthy communions into that confessional, and she walked out lighter than a child. That is what is waiting for you, not condemnation, cleansing. You may feel, looking at the state of things, that you are nearly alone in caring about any of this. Athanasius, the great bishop, stood almost alone against the whole world in his day, and the phrase that came down to us, Athanasius against the world, is not a tragedy, it is a victory. One soul, faithful, is never truly alone. Christ is with that soul, and so is his mother, and so is the whole company of heaven. So choose. Choose Christ, choose his church, choose his sacraments, choose his mother, choose the cross, and do not look back. Next time, I want to tell you about something that happens in a home after a soul returns to grace, but before the household has been cleansed, the strange resistance, the way the cold seems to fight back for a few nights before it breaks. I have watched it many times, and there are things you must know to stand firm through it. I will be waiting for you there.